The Devil State of Mind podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's something you'd love to learn? As an adult, do you make time to learn new things as often as you like, or was that lost in childhood? Kids are always learning and growing, but as adults, sometimes we lose that curiosity. What's something you like to learn? Gardening, a new language, or maybe how to finally beat your best friend in bowling? Therapy can help you reconnect with your sense of wonder because your back to school era can come at any stage. And I've benefited so much from therapy. It has been nothing short of just a lifesaver for me, just an opportunity to speak freely and to really just, hash out everything that's going on in my world. And it really, really is amazing. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, I would highly recommend to give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. All you have to do is rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp and visit betterhelp.com/THPN today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/THPN. We're back. What is going on, Devils fans? I know it has been a minute, but it is your host, your best friend, your confidant, your number one source, Neil Villapiano, and welcome to the Season 6 debut episode of the Devil State of Mind podcast, right here on the Hockey Podcast Network, as well as SportsWire Radio, is always your best place to get everything you need to know about your New Jersey Devils. And as always, guys, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to check these episodes out, especially the first episode of Season 6. Yes, Season 6 of the Devil State of Mind podcast. It has been a long road, but we are here, and I am so excited for another awesome season with you guys. What should be a long season for sure, with a lot of excitement and high expectations going into it. And I can't tell you how pumped I am to be doing another season here of the Devil State of Mind podcast, delivering great content to people like yourself here on YouTube at Devil State of Mind podcast, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You just know that I greatly appreciate all of you. As always, shout out to our sponsors down below: SeatGeek, DraftKings, and of course, BetterHelp as well. Appreciate all of those supporters there and those sponsors. And shout out to everybody at the Hockey Podcast Network, because we are finally here. Hockey season is here. For most teams, rookie camp has started this week. By the time you guys are listening and checking out this episode, they have already begun really the first on-ice day of rookie camp, and the Prospects Challenge will be coming up over the weekend. And so for the first time since April, we will see guys representing the New Jersey Devils and playing some games, and we will get into that. The way this episode is going to work today, we're going to start by talking about the key points of this offseason to kind of bring us all to where we are today. The next thing we're going to be talking about is we're going to look at the rookie/training camp notes and important dates. And then I'm going to end the episode with my five storylines going into training camp. I actually just posted an article for Pucks and Pitchforks talking about these 5 specific storylines. I will leave a link to that article in the description here on YouTube, and you can also just check it out I posted it on my social medias as well, so you can check it out. And also just go to Pucks and Pitchforks as well to check out my articles and all of the articles there covering the New Jersey Devils. So, as always, Devils fans, we have a bunch to get to here on this season 6 debut episode of the Devil State of Mind podcast. So let's not waste any more time and get rolling. And we will get rolling and drop the puck with talking about our first points. And we are going to be talking about the key points of the offseason. And I actually have a bunch of slides for you guys. Going to try to incorporate that a little bit more so that these episodes, especially here on YouTube, look a little more aesthetically pleasing. So we will start with the first big move of the offseason, and that is hiring Sheldon Keefe as the newest head coach of the New Jersey Devils. That happened a couple of months ago as he replaces Lindy Ruff as the next head coach. And obviously there is going to be a lot of excitement around what Sheldon Keefe can bring to this team. And he is going to be one of the many people who have a chip on their shoulder going into this season for sure. The next thing that happened is I just skipped there for a second, but the next thing was finally the Devils get their goalie of the present and really solidify the goaltending for at least the next 2 seasons as they acquired Jacob Markstrom from the Calgary Flames at 31.25% retained in exchange for next year's 2025 first-round pick, which is top 10 protected, and defenseman Kevin Ball. So Kevin Ball is one of the handful of guys that were on last year's team and even on the team 2 years ago that made that, tremendous run into the second round of the playoffs that is now no longer with us. And yet another Devil who eventually gets traded over to the Calgary Flames. So Calgary now has a handful of former New Jersey Devils. You got Blake Coleman, obviously Yegor Sharangovich. Now you add Kevin Ball into the mix. And the Devils get Jacob Markstrom. And to get him at just under $4 million, for the next 2 seasons, I think is honestly quite the steal for Tom Fitzgerald. He really wanted to nail home getting that big game hunting goalie. He talked about it even after the trade deadline, and that's exactly what he did by acquiring Jacob Markstrom. The next thing was the NHL draft. There were a lot of questions about whether or not the Devils were going to, keep the 10th overall pick, trade it for something. We didn't know until we got to draft day, and the Devils decided to keep their draft pick and draft defenseman Anton Saleyev with the number 10 overall pick, the tallest defenseman in the draft this year. He is currently over with Torpedo in the Continental Hockey League, aka the KHL, and he is already getting some top-line minutes and playing very well for a kid that is still not yet 20. And again, sticking along the lines of, being this big physical team that the Devils want to create that identity. He's 6 foot. I think he's 6'7", well over 200 pounds. This is a big dude. And you can see here on YouTube, look at the size of his hands. I mean, they are massive, massive. And the Devils honestly did, make a couple of really, really solid draft picks. I think overall they had a pretty good draft, but it was highlighted by drafting Anton Saleyev, the left shooting defenseman from Torpedo of the KHL, with a 10th overall pick. And talking about, some other moves that Tom Fitzgerald made, some of them involving draft day trades. The first one was receiving a 2024 second round pick, which became Mikhail Yorgorov, who is a goaltender currently going to be playing college hockey. I believe he was playing in the NAHL. And he was considered the number 1 European goaltender in the NHL draft. They also received a second-round pick in next year's draft and traded defenseman John Marino and a 2024 fifth-round pick to the Utah Hockey Club. Yes, that's the first time you're hearing me say the Utah Hockey Club out of my mouth. It won't be the last, as the Devils will be one of the first teams that gets to play the Utah Hockey Club, who were originally the Arizona Coyotes, now moving to Utah. And then we had this other trade, which was the one that I think surprised a lot of people, because with John Marino, especially hearing the rumors about Brett Pesce, it seemed very likely that the Devils were going to move on from John Marino and replace Marino with a guy like Brett Pesce at a similar cap rate and things like that. But this was a trade that surprised a lot of people on the right side, as the Devils acquired forward Paul Cotter and a 2025 third-round pick in exchange for Alexander Holtz and Akira Schmid. So you have Alexander Holtz, who had high expectations being picked, high up in the 2020 draft, and you had Akira Schmid, who had that tremendous first-round series 2 years ago against the Rangers, and now both of them are moving on to the Western Conference, playing for the Vegas Golden Knights. For Akira Schmid, it sounds like he's going to be starting with Henderson, their AHL team. For Alexander Holtz, who will be wearing number 26 for the Vegas Golden Knights, he gets a fresh start after a couple of up and down years in New Jersey. Never could really get to the level that we all expected him to. As I've mentioned before, I think it's just straight up a combination of mismanagement / development from the New Jersey Devils organization. But I also think at times that Alexander Holtz was just not going to get to that level. Maybe it's just he's just not the type of player. Whatever the case may be, it's unfortunate. I'm still going to be cheering on Holtz and also Schmidt as well, unless they play the Devils, of course. And we'll see what happens when those two make their return to New Jersey. Probably at least we'll see one of them by the time Vegas travels to the Rock. And I doubt that they'll have like any sort of like tribute video or anything for either one. Maybe they'll have one for Alexander Holtz. Who knows? But they acquire Paul Cotter, a bottom six guy. You look at it and you can definitely say that this is somewhat of an overpriced for a guy. But Paul Cotter is a guy who not only can be physical, he led the Golden Knights in hits last year, but a guy who can definitely put up 15 to 20 goals. He does have a pretty good scoring touch, was on that Stanley Cup championship team 2 seasons ago. I mean, this is a guy that brings some of that, and he's still pretty young at his I believe it's his entry level contract that he's on, so he's not even getting paid $1 million. So Tom Fitzgerald talked about they're betting on his potential, and so it'll be really interesting to see what he can bring to this New Jersey Devils team. So that was kind of the two biggest trades that we saw, definitely before we hit into free agency. Now, shifting to free agency, there were obviously a lot of rumors, and obviously, as you know, not every rumor ends up being true. There was a lot of speculation that the Devils were in on Steven Stamkos and or Jonathan Marchessault, the top two forwards going into this free agency, and it looked like, at least with Jonathan Marchessault, that he was going to end up signing with the Devils. But then the Nashville Predators swooped in at the last minute and got both Stamkos and Marchessault. So the Devils had to pivot and focus on other areas, and they started on the back end as they got the top defenseman in the free agent market, Brett Pesce, as he comes over from the Carolina Hurricanes on a 5-year deal. They also brought in another physical defensive defenseman, former San Jose Shark and Winnipeg Jet, Brendan Dillon. They brought back, with a little bit of nostalgia and a fan favorite as well, Stefan Noesen back to New Jersey. And I have to be honest, that was probably my favorite move of the offseason, just because of the player that Noesen has become now. I think he's a lot better than what he was when he left New Jersey. And I think it's a guy that could be an absolute pest, really good forward in front of the net on the power play. And I'm really excited that he's back in the fold. And speaking of bringing someone back in the fold, out of nowhere, I think on the second day of free agency, the Devils re-signed, or not re-signed, but brought back Tomas Tatar on a 1-year deal after he spent last year both with the Colorado Avalanche and the Seattle Kraken. Tomas Tatar talked about it was very hard for him that he could not stay in New Jersey. The Devils ended up, pivoting from trying to keep Tatar and ended up acquiring Tyler Toffoli in a trade with Calgary. And, Tatar had a pretty tough year, especially in Colorado. He did a lot better in Seattle, but still not the best year for him. But he comes in back with a team that he's obviously familiar with, and it'll be really interesting to see if he gets paired with Dawson Mercer and Nico Hischier, because if you remember 2 years ago, the Devils, that line was the second best line at 5-on-5 for expected goals in the entire NHL. They were without question one of the most efficient and best forward lines in the entire NHL 2 years ago, and they already have chemistry together. And I think, and I hope, that Sheldon Keefe will take that into consideration once we get into training camp going forward. Some other moves, again, as mentioned before, they did bring in Paul Cotter via that trade. They also acquired Jonathan Kovacevic as well, another big, tall, physical defenseman. And based on the news that we heard today, and we'll get into that in just a little bit, Kovacevic may have a really good shot to make this team out of training camp. And if he wasn't going to be in a position to have one of the top 6 roles with the defensive core, he certainly was a likely candidate to be maybe the 7th defenseman. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But they brought in some of these new guys as well. And then also the Devils decided to lock down some of their young prospects, Seamus Casey and Cam Squires, both this offseason signed their entry-level contracts. Expect both of them most likely to be with the Utica Comets going into this season unless more craziness with the defensive core ends up happening. And again, we will talk about that in just a little bit. The Devils also did re-sign some guys. They brought back Nolan Foote. And again, Nolan Foote, I think this is a big year for him to try to make this team out of camp as a bottom 6 role and really try to establish himself as an everyday NHL player. And they brought back Nico Daws on a 2-year contract. And obviously, as we've seen Nico Daws grow, they had that tremendous documentary the Utica Comets did with Nico Daws a couple weeks ago, which was fantastic. I highly recommend that you guys go check it out if you have not already. But Nico Daws, he has been up and down in the NHL. He has a bunch of experience, and he is definitely a guy that I could see being, one of our future netminders long term. He has that NHL talent. When he's good, he's very good. Unfortunately, when he's shaky, he is shaky. But the big accomplishment for Nico Daws was he was the winning netminder in the Stadium Series game against the Flyers back in February. And so he's back in the fold. And now, having Jacob Markstrom and Jake Allen, knock on wood, barring any injuries, Nico Daws should get a full year in Utica to continue to develop. And hopefully by maybe next season, he is raring and ready to go to be a full-time NHL goaltender, whether that's with Jacob Markstrom or whatever the case may be, but we won't worry about that right now. Now, the biggest thing left in terms of keeping players around in the fold is talking about Dawson Mercer. As of right now, it is all crickets. The last we heard was that both sides were talking, but they were kind of far apart on a deal. Whether that's because of term or money, who knows? And from what we've heard from James Nichols of New Jersey Hockey Now, a lot of the reports / rumors coming out is that most likely both of these parties involved will agree on a bridge deal. I think either way, Dawson Mercer remains a New Jersey Devil. I don't think anyone should panic at any point right now because we went through this with Miles Wood a couple of years ago. We went through it with Jesper Bratt back in 2021. And, Tom Fitzgerald does a great job of getting these guys signed no matter what, and he will. And they are going to make it work. Dawson Mercer wants to be here. He has been nothing short of reliable, has played in every single game he possibly can in the several years that he's already been in the NHL with a tremendous iron streak going on. And I'm sure he doesn't want to break that anytime soon. And I fully expect him to be in camp when camp gets underway next Wednesday. So the next kind of exciting thing was the fact that Jack Hughes, Luke Hughes, and obviously their brother Quinn all got to be on this year's NHL 25 game. Now, full disclosure, I will say this right off the bat. I am not a fan of EA Sports, period. That's the way that I look at it. I am not a fan of that at all. I don't think that EA Sports does that great of a job. You see what they've done with Madden over the years and things like that. I just don't see it. I just don't think that it's that great. I'd put it that way. And really for me, it's just kind of seeing this, it's really cool. Luke Hughes and Jack Hughes become the first Devils players since Marty Brodeur back in NHL 2014 to be on the cover. This is also the first time that we have brothers featured together here, which is very, very cool. And again, we will talk about the news with Luke Hughes in just a little bit. Do not worry. I'm fully aware of what is going on. But yeah, no, this is great. You have three brothers, three of these up and coming superstars in the league that are all going to be featured. And it's really, really exciting for Devils fans to have not one, but two New Jersey Devils featured on the same cover, continuing to bring more exposure to the New Jersey Devils. And I think that is really, really awesome. And the final kind of, I want to say like minor thing that happened was that the Devils signed two players to professional tryout contracts. I did a piece a couple weeks ago talking about potential guys that the Devils could look at to sign for PTOs. Neither one of these guys were mentioned in my article. They signed defenseman Jacob Zubroil or Zobril, and goaltender Michael Hutchinson. What's interesting about Hutchinson is that he does have some experience playing under Sheldon Keefe. Now, let's talk about Zboril really quickly. I took this from the Devils piece when they announced that Zboril had signed a contract with the Devils and a PTL. He spent part of the last 7 seasons with the Boston Bruins organization from 2017-18 to last year, 2023-24. He's 6'1", 200 pounds. He has split time between the Boston American Hockey League affiliate, the Providence Bruins, and the Columbus Blue Jackets affiliate with the Cleveland Monsters. Zboril played 31 games with Providence and another 15 with Cleveland. He appeared in 14 games with the Monsters, registering 4 points, a goal, and 3 assists. And the Brno, Czechia native has totaled 70 career points, 11 goals, 59 assists in 228 AHL games. So if Zboril does make the team out of camp, he will actually have the chance to play in his home country of Czechia in the first 2 games of the season when the Devils play Buffalo in the Global Series to kick off this season. Now let's talk a little bit about Michael Hutchinson. Hutchinson currently is 34 years of age. He spent last year with the Detroit Red Wings and recorded 2 shutouts with a 14-14-3 record for the Grand Rapids Griffins of the AHL. He is a right-handed catching goaltender, and I don't know I think Louis Domingue, dear God, I said Louis Domingue on a podcast episode, I think is the last right-handed goalie glove goalie that we've had since, with now Michael Hutchinson. He has played in 241 career AHL contests since 2010-2011. He has a career record of 120, 85, and 26 with a .914 save percentage and a .262 goals against average and 17 shutouts. So overall in his career, especially in the AHL, it's been pretty decent, a pretty solid goaltender. He also, as mentioned before, does have experience playing with Sheldon Keefe when they were in Toronto together from 2021-22 and 2021-22. So 2020-2021 and then 21-22. Let me just clarify that. So obviously, I'm sure Sheldon Keefe had a lot to say about bringing in Michael Hutchinson to bring a little bit more veteran depth to the goaltending, maybe a little bit more competition. Who knows? We shall see. But that pretty much is all the major moves that happened during this past offseason with this New Jersey Devils team. And so what I'd love for you guys to do, especially here on YouTube, let me know in the comments section what you guys think of all the moves that were made. What was your favorite one? Which one that you didn't like at all? Let me know. Would love, as always, to interact with you guys. Now, let's shift over to our second thing. Talk about rookie/training camp notes and dates. So the first thing, as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, is the fact that the Devils rookie camp is going on right now. And then starting tomorrow, but by the time you guys are listening to this, today will be the first day of the Prospects Challenge being held in Buffalo, New York. The Sabres, Bruins, Blue Jackets, your New Jersey Devils, the Ottawa Senators, and the Pittsburgh Penguins are all the teams going to be involved in these challenges. And the Devils' 3 games are as follows. Friday, September 13th, a little scary there with Friday the 13th. Saturday, September 14th, and then Monday, September 16th. And Amanda Stein of NJDevils.com did also mention that all the games will be available on the Devils website as well as their YouTube channel. So you will definitely have the chance to see a lot of the young prospects that the New Jersey Devils have, and you'll finally get to see a little bit of Devils hockey. Now, talking about the Devils training camp, it does begin next Wednesday, September 18th. It will be the first day. Probably the 19th will be the first day that guys will be on the ice. And that's when we'll finally get to see a lot of the new guys. And then, as you see on the screen here, the preseason then gets underway 4 days later, with the first game being on Sunday, September 22nd, 9 days from the time you guys are checking out this episode, when they're at home against New York Islanders. Your boy, of course, is going to be there for the first opportunity to see some Devils hockey, even though it's preseason. Then they're in Montreal against the Habs. Wednesday, September 25th, they'll be at home against the Capitals. Then they're at Long Island taking on the Islanders Friday, September 27th. Then they play two games in 3 days against the New York Rangers, one at home on Monday, September 30th, Tuesday, October 1st, and then their last preseason game will be October 3rd in Philadelphia against the Flyers. Now, some of you might be looking at this and saying to yourselves, well, Neil, there's a bit of a complication there because the following day, the Devils are supposed to be in Czechia playing their first game of the regular season against the Buffalo Sabres. Full disclosure, it is very, 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 very likely that the guys who will be playing in the preseason game on October 3rd are guys that are going to be with the Utica Comets. That will be essentially a Utica Comets game because by that time, by the 4th or 5th, and certainly the 6th game of the preseason, the roster will be pretty much finalized because eventually they got to fly over there, make sure they get themselves situated for the next couple of days so that they can get ready to play those 2 games back to back to open up the season in Czechia. So that should be your expectation going into that final preseason game, but it'll be Devils hockey nonetheless. And I'm sure a lot of you will be watching if we have the opportunity to do so. So now we've shifted to my last part of this episode, this first episode, and it is talking about storylines. Really quickly, again, as mentioned before we get into that, October 4th and October 5th will be the first 2 games of the NHL regular season for your New Jersey Devils, as they will be taking on an old friend, Lindy Ruff and the Buffalo Sabres in the first 2 games of the year. Really excited that the Devils, for the first time in about 6 years, that the Devils will be playing overseas in the Global Series. The last time they were there, they were playing in Switzerland/Sweden. Now they play in Czechia. Andre Palat getting an opportunity. And as mentioned before, if Zorbril makes it out of training camp, or Zabriel, I feel like I'm going to butcher his name several times here. If he makes it out of camp, then we'll have multiple Czechia players representing the New Jersey Devils, which will be very, very cool. But now we shift to the storylines, which I'm really excited to talk about because there's a lot of different things that can go on here with it. The first one is, how does Sheldon Keefe's system mesh with this team? Now, Sheldon Keefe has had a lot of great success when it comes to coaching talented superstar players. You look at it with Austin Matthews, William Nylander, Mitch Marner, Morgan Riley to an extent. Granted, that's a defenseman. John Tavares as well. So many different guys. Matthew Nyes of recent thing. But you look at it and you say to yourself, he obviously has not had the world's greatest playoff success. In many ways, you can consider him a playoff choker. He has made it out of the first round once in a handful of years that he was the head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs. But I think his system offensively is going to work really well with the offensive talent we have. I think overall we have a little bit more forward depth than maybe the Toronto Maple Leafs have. I've said this many times before. This is the best defensive core that Sheldon Keefe has ever coached. And this is honestly the best goaltending tandem he's ever coached. And so really the question is going to be more about how can he implement a system that can help this defensive core and goaltending be able to protect themselves more, be a little bit more defensively responsible, and not have to force Jacob Markstrom to make 50-plus saves a night and once again have the highest high danger save percentage in the league. Although we're not going to complain if he's once again number 1 there, but certainly you want to make life a little bit easier for Jacob Markstrom. We're not going to see a lot of what Sheldon Keefe can bring, at least in preseason. We might see a little bit of it. But overall, it should be really interesting, especially in the early goings here, what we see from Sheldon Keefe and the coaching staff. Now, the next question is, how will Markstrom look in the preseason? I expect him to play maybe 2 games, maybe 3, before he gets ready for the regular season. I'm sure it'll be exciting for any Devils fan who gets a chance to see him in the preseason of, the first time that we get to see him wearing the New Jersey Devils sweater with his Devils mask and everything. I expect him to look pretty solid. If he has a rough outing, it happens. Again, it is preseason to kind of tune things up. But I think overall, he's going to show a little bit of what he's capable of doing. Not going to show too much and get himself warmed up and ready to go. So I'm definitely going to be keeping my eyes on number 25 during this preseason. The next thing is, where will Brett Pesce and Brendan Dillon fit on the D pairings? Now we come to the frustrating news that we got today. So on, Wednesday, the 11th, September 11th, we saw a picture online from a Barstool video of Luke Hughes on the sidelines of the Michigan-Texas football game this past weekend. And in the video, you can see Luke Hughes has his left arm in a sleeve like he's hurt. And so we start asking around, why is he in a sleeve? What is going on? And luckily, a lot of the reporters who cover the New Jersey Devils did a great job of basically pushing the Devils to make an announcement. And they said that they would announce something later today on the 12th. And they did at around, I think it was around 1 o'clock, when the Devils announced that Luke Hughes injured his left shoulder during one of his off-season trainings, and he will not require surgery, but is going to be out at least 6 to 8 weeks. So that looks to be late October, early November. So it looks like, unfortunately, Luke Hughes will be out at least the first month of the season, which is not the way you want to get the season underway. And we still don't know what's going on with Simon Nemec when he got hurt during the Olympic qualifiers, playing for Slovakia. And hopefully we get some news about him. Hopefully it's not that bad. It would be tough to lose two of your young defensemen right away. So that kind of brings us back to this question of, where are you going to see Pesce and Dillon fit? Well, I think right now, Brett Pesce is still very much likely going to be on that second pairing with whomever. Maybe it's going to be with Brendan Dillon. Maybe you have that. I still think that you end up, if you're going to have a young defenseman on the back end to start, if it's Nemec, you want to pair him with the defensive defenseman. So I think you'll see Pesce on a defensive pairing with Luke Hughes and or whomever is going to be on that second line. And I think you'll see Brendan Dillon being paired alongside Simon Nemec and or whoever they have on that third pairing. That's where I can definitely see them going. Brett Pesce, I think, ends up being on that second power play unit as that defenseman. I also see both of these guys being instrumental in the penalty kill, especially with blocking shots. The next thing kind of focuses again on the defenseman. Who earns that seventh defensive spot? Well, there is now an opening for the top six in the defensive core. And again, these three guys to me seem like probably the most likely candidates for this. You have Santeri Hadaka, you have Jonathan Kovacevic, and you have Seamus Casey. I will say, honestly, though, again, as mentioned before, I think it's most likely that Seamus Casey ends up starting the year in Utica. Maybe he makes the team out of camp as that seventh defenseman, doesn't play a whole lot, and tries to keep that veteran, try to make sure we still have veteran presence in the lineup. But you never know. I'm banking on Santeri Hadaka. He showed a lot of promise last year, a very underrated defensive defenseman who can actually put up a couple of points here or there. I definitely think that he ends up being the one that earns that sixth spot, and I think Kovacevic ends up being that seventh defenseman. It could also flip. You never know. But that's kind of something I'm going to keep my eye on. Now you're really going to look at that defensive core and see what's going to happen, and hopefully we get some more information about Simon Nemec when we get closer to camp. And the last storyline I want to keep my eye on is who fits into the top six wing spot, Andre Palat or Tomas Tatar. Now, I would say for the most part, the wingers are set with Dawson Mercer and Timo Meier and Jesper Bratt. There's that one winger spot, particularly on the left side, whether it's going to be playing with Jack Hughes and or Nico Hischier, as to who plays on that line. Well, with Andre Palat, obviously things have not gone well. in the first 2 years that he has been in New Jersey with several injuries and just not really putting up a lot of points. Although I still think that he is due for a bounce back year. And maybe this is the year that he gets it done, because right now, with all the contracts that we have, and we have a lot of really good contracts, his is the one that sticks out, which honestly isn't that bad anyway. For Tomas Tatar, in terms of that, having that chemistry with Nico Hischier and Dawson Mercer, if they want to play that line together, that gives him maybe a little bit more advantage. And then you have Andre Palat on that third checking line with Eric Holla. And I don't think that Andre Palat is necessarily against that. He did a lot of that last year. I think it's most likely that Tomas Tatar gets that top 6 spot. But Andre Palat could have a really good camp and really impress Sheldon Keefe and that coaching staff, and he might get that top 6 role. So it's really interesting to see how the top 6 ends up filling out once we get to that first game on October 4th against the Buffalo Sabres in check-in. I'm sure for Palat, is that extra motivation if he could be a top 6 guy playing with the Devils, and his first 2 games of the year are in his home country. I'm sure he's very, very excited for that. And so those are my 5 storylines going into training camp. And as always, let me know what you guys think. Which of those storylines is most interesting to you? Is there anything else that we should be keeping our eye on going into training camp? Let me know in the comment section. Would love to get your guys' opinion. But Devils fans, we're back, baby. We are back. Hockey season is finally here. It feels like it took forever to get back, and I am so excited. Also, just want to quickly shout out Rachel Herzog, who just got hired as the new Devils pre- and post-game host on MSG Network. She replaces the lovely Erica Wachter, and as always, we wish Erica Wachter nothing but the best. It's unfortunate that she's no longer going to be covering the Devils, but we'll still see her around, especially on NHL Network. But Rachel Herzog, who comes from covering hockey at St. Cloud State University in Minnesota, also has some TV experience as well, working for a sports station in North Dakota, I think it was. She is now the new pre- and post-game host. And I'm really excited to see what she can bring to the table with our amazing crew that we have with Bill Spalding and Ken Danico, and of course, Bryce Salvador. But again, Devils fans, it's a lot of new faces. It's a new season. And even though we already have some bumps in the road, I'm still so excited for this upcoming year and excited for season 6 of the Devils State of Mind podcast. Woo! NFL Week 1 is here, and a new season means new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Ready to place your bet? Try betting on something simple like picking a player to score a touchdown. Or if you just want to pick who wins and who loses, you can absolutely do that as well. And you can score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the best place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for gambling problem. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 plus age eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gambling resources, see dkng.com/football. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at nfl.com/terms.